Hello everyone. Um, I'd like to talk about a little bit more of a spiritual subject today, but with a philosophical stance as well. And I like to mix philosophy and spirituality. For me, I would say philosophy is kind of my spirituality, or part of it, very strong part of it. And I was thinking yesterday. I was on the bus. I'm actually in Morocco at the moment. I was on the bus, and I was thinking about unconsciousness and suffering and how they're related. Um, and there's a famous saying: "Ignorance is bliss." And I've always felt it's a strange saying, and I really think it's wrong. It's completely wrong. It's absolutely the opposite of what's true. Um, Unconsciousness tends to lead to suffering, in my opinion. But it's often a way we might respond to suffering, that we try to block it out. We try to ignore it, ignorance. And we think, oh, we feel a bit better, for sure, when we do that. But it's actually a form of unconsciousness. We're actually choosing to reduce our awareness of something because it's painful. And it could be painful in various ways. It could be, probably it's often going to be painful to our egos. So it makes us feel worse in ourselves. And because in general most of us are suffering from some degree of low self-esteem, some degree of even self-hatred or self-dislike, then any small exterior thing that tends to make us feel even smaller is almost intolerably painful. And so many of us then choose to pretend it didn't happen, deny it. Denial is another aspect of unconsciousness. And we pretend it didn't happen, or we change, we twist the circumstances in our mind to try to protect our ego. And these are all, basically, they boil down to choosing of lowering our consciousness. And short term, this perhaps makes us feel a little bit better. But long term, unconsciousness and choosing a lower level of awareness of reality, of our inner world, of our failings, of our challenges, is choosing unconsciousness. And unconsciousness is going to, in the long run, is going to lead to more and more suffering. So unconsciousness leads to suffering, and suffering often leads to unconsciousness, as I said, because we want to protect ourselves and we choose the easy option. I'll ignore it. So it's a vicious, potentially a very vicious feedback loop that we could get into, where our unconsciousness is causing us to get into more and more problems. We're not aware of ourselves, we're not aware of how we're affecting other people, we're not really awake to what's going on, And so we're tripping over obstacles, both internal ones and external ones, causing ourselves more suffering, which then in turn causes us perhaps again to choose ignorance and unconsciousness. So the alternative to that vicious cycle is to choose consciousness, obviously, to choose more awareness of self, more awareness of the inner world, more awareness of our emotions. And in particular, what we're going to have to choose is awareness of our failings and our those things that our ego does want to protect us against. It thinks it's protecting us, but really it's not. It's in the long run, it's not going to work. So the alternative here is to choose consciousness, recognizing that it may be painful. It will be painful, and we're going to have the urge to ignore. We're going to have the urge to run away. But we need to. If we're going to choose consciousness, we're going to choose joy and happiness in the longer run. We're going to need to see that pain slightly differently. See it as healing. Just like the pain that you might get by putting some alcohol on a cut. You know, it feels worse at first, but we know in the long run it's going to be a better idea than letting it go bad. And this is exactly the same thing that's happening in our psyche, in our psychology and in our spirit, which are probably quite closely related things. So when we feel that pain, we maybe shouldn't welcome it, for sure, and we should be gentle with ourselves, and we should try to understand ourselves, try to be forgiving with ourselves and with other people. But also, in a sense, we can welcome that pain a little bit, because we know that it's telling us that we're somewhat, we might be in the right direction. We might be going towards consciousness. And in my experience, you'll find that pain does reduce. And so you're on a kind of, instead of a vicious circle of unconsciousness causing suffering, suffering causing more unconsciousness, and more suffering, you start to feel like you're on a bit of an upward cycle, an upward curve where greater awareness is in general is leading you up, away from suffering, away from greater suffering. And in fact, your pains are reducing. Your pain in relation to ego damage is reducing, because you're starting to feel a bit stronger in yourself, a bit more self-esteem, and you can deal with pain easier, that kind of pain. And you're finding out more and more ways to deal with it, and you're finding out ways to be a bit kinder to yourself. And so you're on an upward cycle. And so this is something to consider, I think, that pain isn't entirely a bad thing sometimes, that especially if it's if it seems to be like this kind of pain that comes about because we're being a bit more aware of things that we maybe have tried to ignore in the past. So that's my thoughts for you from Morocco. I'll upload hopefully a few videos and things which are a bit more fun perhaps of Morocco, but I hope this has been interesting for you, and please thumbs up the video if you like it. Cheers.